She's getting cake. So last week we left off with poor Joseph heading to prison. Him and Martha Stewart. Oh, let's not go down this rabbit hole again. She's so good, she went to Camp Cupcake. While Joseph went.
Now she's Snoop Dogg's friend.
Oh.
You know, she can't be all that bad.
Can't, oh yeah, perfect.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
But Moses made it clear that when he went to prison, the Lord was with him. Went with him to prison. The Lord went to prison with Joseph. Lord, I always think of that Chris Rice song I like that. Probably can't think of the title of it, but he talks about how Jesus is in places you don't expect him to be. You know, one of the places would be prison. He's right there with you, or whoever, you know, in prison.
I don't know, I think that's kind of like foxholes. So there's no atheists in the foxhole.
Right, exactly, yeah. No atheists in foxhole. But anyway, the Lord went with him and allowed him to prosper in what he did there too. Didn't matter there in his prison. He kept his integrity, did a good job, and the things that he did prospered because the Lord was with him. So we're going to take up from there, and we'll start in Genesis 40, 1 through 4. Get going here. Okay. So it came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. So they were in custody for a while. So we talked about last week how Joseph foreshadowed Jesus being bound and numbered amongst the transgressors. So here we see Joseph. We're meeting the two transgressors he's with, which is the chief baker and the chief butler. Now, these aren't ordinary people. This, of course, we talked about was the king's prison, special place, where the upper crust would go, kind of like where Martha Stewart went to prison.
Someday Martha's going to visit you.
I hope she does. I'll have her run a party or something for me. Let her do the work. Anyway, they are the chief baker and chief butler. They're the top dogs. The chief butler was in charge of the king's vineyards. He was in charge of making sure all the wine was good, that the king would not be poisoned by the wine. The chief baker wasn't just a baker. He was in charge of the king's kitchens, so all the food side of it. So he was also in charge of making sure the king didn't get poisoned. I mean, that was a pretty big thing. I mean, you see that even clear through the medieval times. Kings were worried about being poisoned by some disloyal member of the court. You know, somebody they wanted to move on. And you see that even in Israel's history, some of their kings were poisoned by other people in their courts, because that's the way you move up the ladder. So we don't know what went wrong, but these two displeased Pharaoh and got sent to his special prison. So now they're, serving their time. Now, Joseph, he was sent there unjustly by the accusations of an evil woman. We don't know what these two men did, but they got in trouble and they got sent there. Most likely they probably did something. So now what happens, poor Joseph, he was a slave outside of the prison, running, a whole estate basically. Had a lot of responsibility, but now he's in an even lower position. He's a slave inside a prison. Can't get much lower than that, would seem like. And now he's serving these members of the court, who worked for Pharaoh. And they weren't common people. If you were put in those positions in Egypt, you were from a prominent family. So they were well-to-do people who were in head positions, and now he's serving them in prison. That seems kind of depressing to go lower, to go to be a slave inside the prison. But anyway, so he's kind of at the bottom. But sometimes you got to get to the bottom, and then Jesus raises you up. You may feel like you're at the bottom, but that's maybe the place where you need to be before he puts you where you're going. So it's the next step in the plan. And And you can't let yourself get frustrated. You know, you might feel like you're in that prison in the low spot of your life, like Joseph. But if God's doing something in your life, he's going to finish it. He's going to get it done, even if it takes you to prison to get it done. And that's basically what Joseph's experiencing, right? So I think about this verse, Psalm 138, 7 and 8. Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you will revive me. You will stretch out your hand against the wrath of my enemies, which is really why he was there, because of his enemies. And your right hand will save me. The Lord will perfect that which concerns me. Your mercy, O Lord, endures forever. Do not forsake the works of your hands. The Lord will finish what he starts in us, even when we are opposed by enemies. It's sometimes hard to see it when you're at the bottom. You feel, and people are against you. You wonder what good's going to come out of it. But God's got something planned for you, and he's going to work it out, even inside a prison. So let's read on a little further. Genesis 45 through 7. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came in to them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in the custody of his Lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad today?" So both men had a dream, and their dreams, they felt meant something. They sensed something different. Now, whether God put that sense on them that these dreams were significant, that they were important, I don't know. But they felt they needed an interpretation. And in their culture, Egypt and other places, it was very much a part of their life to value dreams and to pay attention to them. The Babylonians were the same way. It was just kind of part of the culture of that day that if you had a dream, maybe you need an interpretation. So for them, it's even more frustrating because here they are trapped in a prison. They couldn't just run down to their local palm reader and get help. So that probably frustrated them because they were cut off from their source of interpretation. They didn't have the help they would normally go get. I mean, we read in, if you remember, in Daniel's story when the king Nebuchadnezzar had his dream and he was wanting an interpretation. He sought the sorcerers and astrologers and the wise men of his kingdom to help give him an interpretation. So it was very important. But these guys didn't have that anymore, so they became very discouraged. What's interesting is that God gave these pagan men, these probably basically evil men, a dream. He gave them a message. Have you ever thought much about that? God spoke to King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. He was an evil guy too. He speaks to bad people just as much as he speaks to good people. He uses it for his purposes. So we may think he would only speak to Christians or people that are following him, but he may speak to someone who's not because he needs to get a message out or get something done using that person. So basically that's the whole point of this. Yes, ma'am?
There's a dream that Muslims are having.
Oh, yeah.
Where they see the man dressed in white.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming to Christ through it.
Mm-hmm.
And they will say to someone, "Have you seen the man in white?"
Right.
They're not sure what it means until they inquire, and they're being saved, and they're having quite a revival.
Yeah,
That's their dream.
I read some of that, and I think a guy's written a book about it now. He's been talking to all the people who have had that dream about that man. Yeah, and that was the thing I was going to say. Sometimes he speaks to the lost just because he's trying to witness to them and draw them to him. So you don't have to be a Christian just to hear from God.
And one more, and I'll be quiet about it.
It's okay.
A gentleman used to be our pastor here. He and his wife went to Crete,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't just go in there as a missionary. You have to have a business.
Uh-huh.
And one of the big guys like the mayor of the town where they went in as a water purification company, and he said, I dreamt about you before you got here.
Oh, wow.
And that was a few years back, but
Wow.
God is using dreams still to this day to
Yeah.
accomplish his purpose.
Right.
I think sometimes we're too distracted by media things to
Right.
maybe get quiet enough or undistracted enough,
Mm-hmm.
but their testimony was it just blew them away.
Yeah, because it kind of showed they were supposed to be there. It was kind of a confirmation. Yeah. Let's see. So God will speak to those who are not his, who may even be downright evil if needed for his plans or purposes. Because each time, even when King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams came to him, it was meant for a purpose to further Daniel in the kingdom. And that's what he wanted. It saved Daniel and moved him up the ladder. Same here with Joseph, speaking to Pharaoh, or speaking to the butler and the baker, giving them these dreams is meant to move Joseph on. It's the whole purpose behind it. This is also a reminder that God can speak to us in dreams, which is what Claudia was bringing up. I think he still does. I think sometimes we don't, maybe not even pay attention. I've even asked God to speak to me in dreams. I'll take any method. Speak to me verbally, speak to me loud and clear, whisper to me, give me a dream, send an angel, I don't care. I just want to hear from you. I don't care if it's in a dream. And I've always been an active dreamer, and I always think about my dreams afterwards, and I kind of like try to analyze them, and a lot of times I can see where they're just my day is being worked out in my head, and it's coming out in whatever weird dream and I can see pieces of my day or because it fitted into that dream. Other times I don't know, they're very weird dreams. And then there's been, like for lately, I've had a repeated dream, and it comes in a slightly different format every time it comes. And I keep thinking, now, why am I having this repeated dream? It's got the same basic concepts in it. So I keep asking myself, is there something to this dream? Is my mind trying to work out something, or is God trying to tell me something in this dream? Yes, Carolyn, I am strange. I can see by that look on your face.
About to dream.
We all are. Susan, Claudia. I had coffee and I'm still ready to drop off. But anyway, so it's good. I think sometimes we should think about our dreams and see, is God telling you something? Maybe he's trying to get a message through to you. Because maybe you're not paying attention. During the daytime we get so busy. Nighttime's the perfect time to talk to us, whether it's verbally, he's talking to us, telling us something specific, or whether he's using the dreams to talk to us, because we are so busy and so distracted in the daytime, or our emotions are so busy, or there's just too much busyness, we don't hear God. So when are you the most attentive? Sometimes when you're asleep.
And then last night, I don't actively dream dreams that I remember very often. But last night I woke up, and I can't tell you exactly what was happening in the dream, but I woke up crying and begging God to help one of my children.
Oh.
And I took that as serious.
Yeah.
Because
You can't go wrong praying for your kids.
No, and that's where I always go when I'm upset is prayer, but and even in my sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important.
The Bible says we will have these things occur to us throughout time, but especially in the end times.
Right.
And when we start seeing these, we're to look up.
Right. He's trying to get our attention.
And
So if you can't remember your dreams, that means
You need Prevagen?
sleep on memory.
You need Prevagen.
I've heard if you keep a journal or something next to your bed and you write it down, as soon as you wake up, you can remember a lot more dreams. But
And you'll
you
laugh
forget them.
afterwards.
You forget them really quick after you've been awake a
as
few
soon as I
minutes.
wake up, I have to go to the bathroom.
So,
Really excited about it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe put my phone in there.
so, yeah, you could say it, right? So speaking of what Claudia was saying, she's just ahead of me. Job 33:14 through 15, that's okay. You're confirming what I'm saying. For God may speak in one way or in another, yet man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men while slumbering on their beds. Whoops, I just kind of read that weirdly, but anyway, he's talking about that sometimes he'll speak to you in the dream when you're slumbering. And then Joel 2:28, which is what we're supposed to see towards the end times, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And that sounds like a really widespread occurrence. There'll be no doubt. There'll be so many people. That's kind of like you kind of think with the guys in the Middle East, they're having the dream that they're having amongst their own group, that God's working strongly in the Middle East right now in their whole zone. So, but this sounds like it's just like all over. There'll be no doubts that God is speaking, because there'll probably be a uniform message coming out of everybody's heads, when they wake up in the morning. And then Acts 16:9 says, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia stood and pleaded with him, saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. So that was like something in the church age, that dreams were occurring, guiding Paul, just as a New Testament example. So, but dreams aren't the only way he speaks to us. Hebrews 1 through 2, God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the worlds. So he speaks to us through Jesus, through his Spirit. And God speaks to us through Jesus' words in the Bible, his Spirit, other Christians, dreams and visions, and circumstances. But that's a whole other study. I just wanted to give you a summary of, if you're thinking about how does God speak to you, you need to pay attention, because sometimes I notice with me, maybe I see something in the Bible that really stands out, that God's saying something to me. And then he might have another person I come up to later in the day, a Christian brother or sister, kind of repeat a similar concept, and it's like God's reconfirming a second way he's speaking to me. So sometimes he'll use more than one way to confirm it to you, And then sometimes it's the circumstances that he slips in there, that you got to be careful. Don't decide strictly on circumstances necessarily, but they might be a pointing tool, They might be a confirming tool. So anyway, that's another study. That takes a while if you study all that stuff, which we've done that before. But let's look back at verse 6 again. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. Now the Hebrew word for sad, zape, I probably can't say it right, but anyway, is meant to convey a state of discouragement, a state of discouragement that is so strong one's appearance is affected. So it just came out in them. It was obvious to them that they were so discouraged because they had this dream and had no interpretation. That's how either God urged it so much in their spirit, or just because of their circumstances. But what's good about this is that Joseph came into them and he noticed. He didn't just walk on past them, he actually cared for them as people. Now they were his superiors in life, so to speak. They were evil by comparison. They weren't part of his culture. He could have just ignored them and just done his whatever duties he had to do. But instead, he stopped and he asked. He took time, despite who they were or who he was, to pay attention and talk to them and show that he cared. Find out what is making them so sad. Why are they so discouraged? And it's a real good example to us, because we see people who are distraught or sad, whether they're in our families, on our job sites, maybe even run into them at the store. And you can tell that there's something not right, that they're burdened about something. we have to be willing, when God prompts us, to stop and show we care. Ask him, are you okay? You know, is something wrong? You know, try to encourage people whatever way you can, just like Joseph's trying to help them. So we need to take notice of people, stop and ask how they're doing, and be a good listener. That's the hard part, is actually taking time to listen. Because sometimes we just want to keep moving, and the person maybe has a 20-minute story when you only had time for a 5-minute story, and we've got to be patient and be good listeners.
Speaking of which, I missed the whole first thing, the one before that, sorry.
Has everybody got this one? Let's see, the one before this is this one? Is that the one?
Yes, sorry.
Only the most important thing here.
I know. I was off somewhere else listening to something.
Probably reading your Bible.
She was just focused elsewhere. She was listening to the song in her head. Was, have you got it?
No, I was talking about verse 3, because it was so neat. The sun is the radiance of God's glory. I thought, wow, that is so cool. So I gotten caught up,
In Hebrew, verse 3?
yeah, 1-3.
Oh, you kept going down that, Hebrew 1. Okay. So are you willing to listen to, encourage, and serve people in the ways the Holy Spirit prompts you to? Are you a good listener? Are you willing to stop and listen?
I don't think we all are good listeners as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a gift we've lost.
Yeah, we don't make time to sit down. I mean, think about the old days, back even when I was a kid and before, way a long time ago. You know, the neighborhood knew each other, you know, the kids played with each other, the folks sat out on the lawn in the chairs together, you know, people talked, and you knew each other. And not a lot of that goes on anymore, and we're all busy rushing. I keep myself so busy, I don't have time to sit and listen like I should.
And where is God's voice? In the still breeze.
Small
The
whisper,
thunder,
not the.
yeah, not,
Small
and
whisper.
how much of my day do I sit and listen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my life isn't nearly as much pressure as when I had kids or worked. There's still much busy stuff to do, but
Right.
I just think, I talk to myself, but I really do worry about myself that I don't listen to God enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't make it a point to, you know, if he talks to me, I'll have to talk really quick because I don't even sleep anymore.
So, you know, we have to start. I ask God to open my spiritual eyes and ears so that I would hear him throughout the day, or see where he's working, where he wants. I always go back to the old Blackaby thing, see where he's working, where he wants me to join him. And what are those opportunities? Open my eyes so I see them, so I don't ignore them. And open those ears so I listen. And I think, you know, I need to do that more, you know, so that I see those opportunities where I'm supposed to stop and talk. Say, why are you sad? How can I help you? You know, what can I do to encourage you? And we really need to get rid of some of our busyness. That would help a lot. Get rid
I
of.
told you what the acronym for that is, didn't I?
You did, but I don't remember now.
Being under Satan's yoke.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
He can keep you
Busy.
so distracted.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a magician. Don't look before you're, don't look
Yeah.
what his hand's doing.
All right.
He'll be present. Think of it.
So we need to try to put into practice Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So if you see someone who's downtrodden, you know, Don't just try to crack a joke to perk them up. Maybe they need you to cry with them. Maybe they need some laughter, but you need to be sensitive what the Holy Spirit's telling you to do with them, how to encourage them. Some people need you to sit there and cry with them. They just need that support. And then Philippians 2:4, let each of you look now not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. So this is try not to get so caught up in your own stuff all the time, putting your own stuff first. You got to think about others. What's that one? Jesus first, others next, yourself last. Joy? I always try to remind myself of that one once in a while when I'm getting off track. Have joy. Jesus first, others second or next, whatever it is, and then yourself last. So let's go on with our story. When he stops and asks what happens. Genesis 48. And they said to him, we each have had a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. So Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please. So Joseph has a really great opportunity here, and what did he do? He gave God the credit. He said, who's the interpreter of dreams? God. Not one of your magicians, not me. It's going to be God that can give you the answer to that. And he uses the word Elohim here, which we've talked about that difference before, is God the creator. You know, we said there for a while they were using the word Lord or Yahweh because he's the covenant God with the Hebrew people. But here he is, he's talking to Egyptians who don't have that covenant relationship with God. So he kind of brings it back to making them aware of God the creator. He's your creator. So he changes the terminology for them and brings it back to where they might understand as Egyptians. This is a good example to us when we're talking to others. Try to turn the conversation to God. Give God the credit. Don't say, oh, hey, if we sit and pray about maybe we can get an answer, say God will help you. God will give you the answer. Give God the credit. Give him the glory in the situation. Sometimes we forget to give God the credit when we're talking to others, or forget to look for that opportunity to slip in the conversation about God, drawing the attention back to God. We just kind of get caught up in whatever, worldly conversation we're having with them. We need to remember to give God the credit or glory when he is really doing his work through us. So anything we accomplish with someone, just like Joseph with these two other prisoners, it's going to be because of God that any of the work gets done. Everybody got that? So we know some verses tied to that. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. So that's what Joseph's doing in his time in prison. He's doing it all for the glory of God. Even his words to these prisoners, he's making sure God gets the glory. And 1 Peter 4:11 says, if anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. So it's important that everything we do is for his glory. Our conversations with someone we're trying to encourage, a good work we're doing to help someone. Make sure God gets glorified in what we're doing. Don't ignore that part of your speech with people. Daniel did the same thing. He gave credit to God in his story, one of his stories, Daniel 2:27-30. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. For as for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this, and he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, the secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes who make known the interpretation to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. So he gave God the glory and the credit for his situation, just like Joseph has started out to do with his. But unfortunately, there can be consequences for not giving God the glory as well. Sometimes I don't think we think about that because we're so busy, we just kind of move through whatever situation and we forget to give God the glory. But there can be consequences. You know, God makes his decisions about how you honor him or not. And one really sad case was in the case of Moses, who wrote this book, Numbers 20, through 12. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water." So what are they told to do? Speak to the rock, and the water is going to come out. "Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals." So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out?" Who did he say? Must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them." So because they disobeyed his orders, they didn't speak to the rock, they struck the rock, and then they said, "We will bring water for you out of this rock." They didn't give God the glory and didn't obey him. They had severe consequences. They couldn't even go to the promised land they'd been walking towards for 40 years. I mean, how sad is that? Yeah, I mean, all that Moses did. But what did you notice in this story? Even though they didn't give God the glory, God still took care of his people. He still provided the water even though they were disobedient. So he'll get his work done no matter what we do. But we may pay the consequences for not giving him the glory for the work he's done. So it reminds me of Proverbs 18. It says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." We've got to be careful about our pride.
Where's that one?
Proverbs 16:18. Is it missing?
Oh,
The last line is missing.
Is it?
After description.
It doesn't say, "And a haughty spirit before a fall."
Oh, because that's the whole verse. Yeah, sorry. I just wrote the concept.
The concept.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the whole verse is "and a haughty spirit before it fall." That's what happened to poor Moses and Aaron. Feel so bad because you know how hard he worked and what things he suffered through and all the criticism from the people, and then boom, he can't even go to the promised land. So be careful to give God the glory. Okay, I'm cutting the lesson off here because there was so much more in the rest of it. I didn't think I could fit it all in tonight because of the next part of the story. So I figured it'd be better to maybe cut it into two slightly smaller lessons and do it that way instead of one big long one. So, but there's some cool stuff in the next part of this story. So next week we'll do that. Does anybody have problems with Palm Sunday? Not Palm Sunday, but it's Easter break next week. Do we still want to have Bible study, or are we all good? Nobody's.
Some of us won't be here.
Is everybody going to be here? You're not running away on spring vacation?
I'll be here, but I won't be here the Sunday after.
Easter, you'll be gone.
The Monday after Easter.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I was wondering if people will be around on that Monday too, because it's,
I won't be on day 11.
that's this next Monday, Palm Sunday, Monday.
It's almost 2 weeks later.
Huh?
It's almost 2 weeks later. We won't.
Well, it's up to you guys.